cumbrous to give a detailed consecutive account of our wanderings inside that cavernous, eon-dead honeycomb of primal masonry. That monstrous lair of elder secrets which now echoed for the first time, after uncounted epochs, to the tread of human feet. This is especially true because so much of the horrible drama and revelation came from a mere study of the omnipresent mural carvings. Our flashlight photographs of those carvings will do much toward proving the truth of what we are now disclosing, and it is lamentable that we had not a larger film supply with us. As it was, we made crude notebook sketches of certain salient features. After all our films were used up.
You just heard the beginning of Chapter 6 and the beginning of the last half of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And this is The Dark
Descent
with Willow and Phil.
You know what I will say about the Elder Ones?
I really hope you'll have a lot to say about the Elder Ones.
You know, they are like wheelchair accessible.
It is the most wheelchair accessible ancient civilization I believe we'll ever encounter in weird literature. Yes.
Yes. Like they just got ramps everywhere.
And a lot of smoothed out floors thanks to those shoggoths. I wish I had a little shoggoth in my house to clean the floors, because it seems like they do a pretty good job of it.
No.
I once wrote a short story that I read out loud at a gathering once about a guy who had found a shoggoth in his house and was attempting to raise it as a pet, but it got out of hand, so he had to call an exterminator. It was called "Who Are You Going to Call?" Thank you, everyone.
An exterminator, apparently.
You call the shoggoth exterminator who specializes in them. It involved having to flip over into an alternate dimension of like untold horrors, but we got there. So, At the Mountains of Madness, Part 2.
Yeah?
Yeah, beginning with a literal dark descent.
You know, the end of the second paragraph on Chapter 6 is, we soon realized from what the carvings revealed that this monstrous city was many million years old. And, you know, did we not already realize that several times?
Okay, but you can sort of, to me, you can know intellectually, but like, you're like, well, this is still impossible. So I guess once you get there and you start looking at their drawings, you're like, okay.
But
these guys have been around for millions of years.
Isn't it possible also, though, that it's just fictional stories they've written on their walls? Like,
they do acknowledge that. They do acknowledge that in this, that they could be looking at their mythology.
So this realization has just as much foundation as all of the other realizations based on like geology and stuff.
However, we do have their fossils in the geological strata, and we do have the Necronomicon of Abdul al-Hazred that has told us these stories already.
Which is also wrong about some things, though.
Does get a lot, but you have to remember that H.P. Lovecraft got a lot of things, quote unquote, wrong in his Tales of the Mythos, because each mythos tale presents this history slightly differently depending on who's telling it. So like, it's kind of like, it is mythology because it's like, there's a lot of like conjecture and guesswork, but it does go a long way towards explaining how good Dyer is at interpreting all these like ancient hieroglyphs and murals.
Yes.
He has read the story before.
Which is interesting because, as we learn, he didn't read it all the way through.
He read it in bits and pieces. Yeah, like because I love that. Like,
only one person on this expedition read it all the way through.
And that was?
Danforth.
Yes.
Who goes crazy.
Right. Because Danforth had a lot of experience. He was the literary one, wasn't he?
I think so.
Yeah, he was the guy who like read everything, quoted everything. It's fascinating that this also ties it in with Poe's story of Arthur Gordon Pym. Like, it deliberately becomes linked in with that tale, almost in a weird continuity. Like, oh my God, I bet Edgar Allan Poe was somehow connected to this mythos. Like, the characters are like he must have been privy to some information we didn't have.
I think it's awesome that H.P. Lovecraft was writing fan fiction about Edgar Allan Poe,
Poe fan. That's what this entire beginning of his career was. It was just
which
Poe
is
fanfic.
incredible. You know what's also awesome? That this was written before tectonic plates.
But before the tectonic plates were proven like to have
Hmm.
been a thing, it was
This
still
was
a vague theory by a lot of scientists.
which H.P. Lovecraft clearly championed or rallied behind. It was incredibly unpopular in the 30s. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't start gaining like actual like popularity until the 60s.
Yeah, the movement of the plates was so controversial because it flew in the face of our belief that the universe, like we already had evolution, we already had like the Earth not being the center of the universe, and now we're being told the Earth itself wasn't formed perfectly. It changes over time and it's just always evolving. Like that was just a lot for people to swallow. Even
And
though if you look at the continents, they do fit together pretty well.
to be fair, to be fair, just because something looks like something doesn't mean it is that thing.
Very good.
That's like important science. It's like why giant mountains that kind of look like tree rings don't mean that they were giant trees at one point.
Yes.
Um, and we hadn't discovered the mechanism by which the continents could have drifted that way.
Right. It took a
So,
lot more study and a lot more exploration under the sea to figure that stuff out.
so despite the things looking like the other things, because there was no real logical way to explain what was going on, it lacked the merit of the science. Like it lacked merit. And if you can't prove something, you can't just go ahead and take that as full face value in science.
But we're also looking at in this story particularly Lovecraft's knowledge of like sort of the evolution of our discovery
Hmm.
of how to chart the fossil record, how to use the fossil record to place things in time. Like there's a lot of new science coming out in
Hmm.
this story, and that's one of the reasons this tale is seen as one of the foundations of fear. That's right. This is the
Whoa,
next
I
story in,
blurred out.
in David Hartwell's Foundations of Fear, a book that is filled with stories that are the foundations of modern horror. And this is considered the first real horror novel that took pulp horror and was like, but what if we treated it like we treat hard science fiction? Like, what if we were
Hmm.
like, hey, these monsters may not just be monsters, there might be science. And even Lovecraft was like, this whole pantheon of gods I've created, what if there was science behind it? Like, what if this wasn't just mythology, but this was like alien technology? And this is the story that really just crammed it all together.
What if we combined the Cthulhu mythos with Frankenstein?
um, are you bringing up Guillermo del Toro's weird and terrible screenplay for At the Mountains of Madness?
I actually wasn't. I was just making a science fiction X horror joke.
Because we will be discussing that at the end of this episode, which
Well,
I
yes.
reread it and I was like, oh, Guillermo, oh boy. So
Um,
what happens in this half of At the Mountains of Madness?
for a while, not much. We just get a lot of information.
Hmm.
They explore the area a bit more, read, watch, look at, take pictures of. They're these incredibly intricately, beautifully crafted murals and sculptures, that basically tell the stories of the Elder Ones from start to finish.
Hmm.
Um,
And what is the story of the Elder Ones from
they
start to
came
finish?
from the sky and went to the sea and then went out of the sea, and then Cthulhu's children showed up and they fought and then they won the war, and then they
They no,
also
they had a truce.
yeah, they had a truce, and then things were okay for a bit, except for the fact that the creatures that they created also sort of rebelled kind of briefly, but were, dealt with and resubjugated, which seems like a terrible idea, but that's beyond my whatever. And then also more aliens came from even further beyond the stars and were
The
like, hey,
Migo, yes.
yep, hey, this is our place now. And they were like, ah, crap. And then they were all kind of shoved into this one central landmass, except for the people below the ocean. And then everything got really cold and they went underwater and something went horribly wrong.
Yeah, and they abandoned Antarctica at some point. Now let's talk about really quick. Or however long we want. It's our show, god dang it.
Yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Let's talk about the shoggoths.
They're gross.
What are shoggoths?
They're like lumps of weird flesh kind of put together to do manual labor. Their consciousness is basically just an echo of the elder ones. Like they didn't have their own trait like motivations or brains really. They just existed as an extension of the elder one's will. And as all evolution happens over the course of millions and millions of years, eventually that stopped being the case. And the elder ones also stopped understanding them on a fundamental level,
Hmm.
it would seem. And they rebelled. They were defeated, maybe. Because their whole thing's mimicry, right?
Yeah. They
And
don't have personalities of their own.
and also we saw this like is it just personality mimicry or is it also physical mimicry?
That's always been kind of up in the air. It's left very vague intentionally by Lovecraft and has been interpreted many different ways by people who've come along later. I will spoil right now that in Guillermo del Toro's adaptation, they can fully mimic human beings. In fact, this Antarctic expedition uh, gets infiltrated by members of their own crew who are actually the Migo or the Shoggoths who look like humans. And part of it is not knowing who to trust because the
Oh, it's
Shoggoths
just
look.
the
It's
thing.
just the thing. Like literally it's just the thing after a while. But yes, so the Shoggoths in this story, it seems more like they don't have language of their own, so they can only mimic the language of the elder ones, the old ones, which comes into play
Yeah,
later on. Uh it's
very
also worth
briefly.
it's also worth noting that this, if you think about it, well, if you think about it, everyone's talked about this, but these are essentially robots
Yeah,
that have been
flesh robots.
granted a little bit of autonomy. And then over time, because of the powers, because they keep getting more and more instructions, they develop their own personality and rebel against their creators, which is literally an AI story.
Yeah,
It's
no, there's a sentence in this section of the book. Where is it? Um, where is it? Oh, right here. On page 96 of
yeah.
the Foundations of Fear, page whatever of the actual story. The old ones had perhaps become satisfied with their decadent art or had ceased to recognize the superior merit of the older carvings. That I was like, well, I'm gonna throw up because that's just straight up an allegory for AI.
And we actually find out later that yeah, that we find out that the Shoggoths are responsible for the like crappy carvings that are just like yeah, that are just trying to it is wild how much so for a long time this story was interpreted as a slave rebellion, like this is what happens when the people you subjugate rebel against you. But in today's technology climate, it really reads as an AI. Like, it's the Terminator all over again. It's
Yeah,
just whatever it's called, Skynet, like rebelling against its creator and trying to take over. Because the Shoggoths they do the things that the elder ones can't do. They can lift heavy loads. They help
hmm
build the cities. Like there's all these cities that got built, and it's only because the Shoggoths were there. They're just construction equipment with little brains or no brains, but
hmm
like little abilities to think, and they have pseudopods and they can turn into any shape they want. They're like the shmoo. And yeah, and then they get sick and tired of being subjugated by their creators, and we're like, no, we want to rebel. And how do they kill their creators?
by sucking their heads off. There's really no other way to say that. That's
No,
exactly how they
it's
put it into
literally
the
what it's
story.
is. They either
It's
bite or
like
suck their heads off.
it's like what is the animal that is it seals? It might be seals that suck penguins' skin off to kill them.
But ties right in with the albino penguins.
Yep.
Uh,
Animals are weird.
Animals are weird. And yes, it's very animalistic. Like it's everything we're given. Like it summarizing this doesn't explain like demonstrate how analytical this whole thing is. Like how very matter of fact all of this. Like Dyer is like overwhelmed by all this. Danforth is overwhelmed by all this, but they're also just like this is a thing that like it's not like when you look at it all laid out, it's like, oh, this is like this happened before we were around, but this happened, and yeah, these are like just
It's
this is a thing, and they were overthrown by their creation.
it's important to remember that what we're reading now is an after is a recall of information they were getting all at once and had time to look in, like dig deeper
Yeah.
into.
Yes. And
Like,
supplement with passages from the Necronomicon.
yeah, like this is a post-adventure analysis of everything they found. I'm sure that half of this stuff they pieced together afterwards.
And it's a warning. And remember, it's a
Hmm.
warning. Like he's writing all this
It's a terrible warning, by the
because
way.
it's so cool. You're like, yeah, I gotta get. I
I
mean,
think I think what I said in one of the things was you're telling people who like to poke at stuff that there is stuff to poke at.
yeah, and I mean, there's a reason that there are like countless sequels written to this
Hmm.
by every great weird fiction writer. Like because it is again, they're all just like, and so the Starkweather people went out and investigated. There's an adaptation of this in comic book form that is literally just the Starkweather group going out and like one of them reading this story on the way there and just being like, "Oh, I think this is a bad idea." So like,
As I said previously, the basis of one of the role-playing games is this expedition,
yes, yes,
or
it
is the
is.
survivors of this
And
expedition.
part of it is the brilliance of what Lovecraft did, which is, and I was just reading about this. I think there's a collection called Beyond the Mountains of Madness, and it's edited by Robert M. Price, and it's got like William Michael and Brian Sammons and C.J. Henderson and Pete Rawlick and all these great weird fiction authors writing sequels to At the Mountains of Madness. But in his intro, Robert M. Price says that what Lovecraft does is he expands on a lot of things. Like he gives you like detailed descriptions of the old ones, and he gives you detailed descriptions of the Shoggoth and what they do and how they live and how they were created. But then he's really vague about other things. Like,
Hmm.
well, we'll get to it, but like what's beyond the other mountains of madness? And like what's up with the salt and what's up with why did they take the gasoline and these questions that never get answered in this whole story. And Lovecraft like just sort of presented it as it's a mystery, and this is just one guy telling you what he saw and what he thinks he's figured out. And yeah, so there's a reason that there can be a whole role-playing game based on it.
Speaking of the other mountains of madness, he says in the story, I prayed that none ever might in regards to seeing, like laying eyes upon them,
Mhm.
but also gives their exact latitude and longitude
Yeah,
not
it's pretty
even
much
two
it's
sentences
300 miles
prior.
that way. It's 300
He
miles
says
exactly that way.
he says they extended as it appeared from the latitude 77 degrees east, longitude 70 to latitude 70 east, longitude 100 degrees less than 300 miles from like, bro, what are you doing? I don't want
Don't
anyone to ever look at
go
this.
there.
But
There's these
here
crazy awesome mountains 300 miles in that exact direction. Whatever you do, don't go. Please don't go there. There's goblins there or
like, what are
something.
you doing? I am of the belief that not only is he writing this warning for himself, but he's also being compelled to write this warning because whatever's over there wants to be seen so badly.
Well, it's
That's
kind
the
of the
only like thing I can make sense of.
it's the paradox of the anti-war film. And I can't remember what filmmaker said this, but a great filmmaker once said that it is impossible to make an anti-war film because if you make an anti-war film, by the very nature of film, it makes war look cool. Like it always
Hmm.
makes war look cool to some people at least. And that's this. You can't warn people away from the mountains of madness because simply by acknowledging that there are mountains of madness, people are going to want to go to
What
the
if
mountains of madness.
if the best way to dissuade people from going to a place that you have decided to call the Mountains of Madness is by calling them the shittiest mountains, like the whatever, the most boring mountains I've ever laid my eyes upon. Like, if you had just not said anything.
I guess what Dyer is going through though, and this is acknowledged at the beginning of the story, and it's one
Hmm.
thing that really came to me in like having reread the beginning again, is the fact that this is the beginning of a new era, and they have like planes that they've taken, they have
Hmm.
these like super portable instruments. He knows that more they're not exploration doesn't stop. Like it doesn't stop. Like once you start, you don't stop. Like no matter how dangerous it is, people will go. So maybe for him, this is like at least I'm going to give them all the information I have, because
Yeah.
people are going to go there eventually. It's only 300 miles from the last
But,
stop.
like, this is, like, the trolley problem, except for when you pulled the lever to save the most amount of people, 100,000 more people jumped on the tracks with the one person after you
Woo!
pulled the lever because you pulled the like, it's like, okay, yeah, you've just saved 3 people, but by doing so, you've convinced 100 more people to jump on the tracks in front of the
It's
train.
like if you called the trolley the dangerous but soothing massage trolley. They
Yeah.
were like, well, it's a
Like,
good
it's
chance
like
I can enjoy this massage.
it's like, okay, I understand your motivations and your desire to save people, but also, sir,
Yes. No,
it
it's true, but they're gonna go anyway. So you may as well give them some sort of idea of what they're up against. What they're
only
up against
for
is
is horrors.
is horror. So what else do they once we've and it's amazing. Like we do get like the spawn of
Mhm.
Cthulhu. Like they have a battles of which are just they're little Cthulhus. They show up in other stories. They are basically like sort of like I don't know, like sort of Godzilla size, maybe a human size, like various sizes of Cthulhu. They just look like Cthulhu's, but they're more manageable. And the Migo, and he does mention, and I love this, that our boys, the old ones, are made of matter. Like they're just things that you can. They're just people.
Mhm.
But Cthulhu's spawn and the Migo are made of material that does not exist in our universe because they're from outside our reality. So the wars are very, very difficult because our
Weren't
boys,
the Cthulhu from Pluto, or was that another
that's another
species?
species. That's another species who weren't from Pluto, but the last species, that was that Watcher Out of Time. That
They
may have
said
been
something
like
about Pluto.
because there's creatures who like inhabit Plutonians and then they come to Earth, but they're not actually from Pluto. Regardless, the idea that like our boys, the old ones, are up against beings of an unusual reality and still no, they don't come out on top, but they come out, it's a stalemate. Uh is to me like pretty impressive. And it's the thing that makes Dyer start accepting these creatures as scientists, and he says they're men.
Mhm.
These are just men. Like
From a different era.
they're not goblins, they're not creatures, they're not boogeymen. They're just people who were scientists. Uh and
Yes.
that's where people are like, was Lovecraft softening a little bit in his later years?
I don't think so.
Okay, what do you have to say?
I think that we briefly touched on this when we were talking about AI. This story is clearly a story of a group of subjugated creatures rising up against a master race
Hmm.
and losing and being resubjugated, and then fighting back and being framed as these vile, awful villains.
Okay.
Like, I think that this is a very easy way to interpret this. The elder ones, I don't think are just men. I think they're very explicitly white men.
Ah.
Like I could see that interpretation. I see why it might be interpreted in the other way, but I think that the villainization and sort of turning this subjugated race into just mindless beasts and animals that just only have knowledge and understanding because their masters mistakenly gave it to them is an uncomfortable thing to reconcile with the idea that maybe he was growing as an individual.
I understand that. I also understand that
Mhm.
it's complicated by
Mhm.
the notion that we know that, or we're told, I guess you could say, that the old ones did create these beings, but
Yeah.
that doesn't give them, once a creature attains sentience,
Mhm.
then it's like, well, there's your ethical dilemma. So no, I agree, and well, I don't disagree, but I agree that that is an
I think there's
utterly valid.
multiple interpretations, and given his previous commentary on very specific things and not so specific things, it's hard to not read into that portion in the way that it came across to me at
Yes.
first glance.
It's also interesting that they make mention of the fact, and this is mentioned in the Necronomicon, that the old ones created what we know of as life on Earth. That the old
Mhm.
ones created life on Earth as food, but then it just kind of like went its own way. Then they were like, it's kind of evolving on its own. We'll just let it do whatever it wants to do. And that early humans were still like early primitive humans were still
Hmm.
food animals for them at one point, but then they were just sort of left to go on their own way. And that's a recurring theme. And one of the reasons why the movie didn't get made was because that's also the theme of Prometheus.
Hmm.
And Prometheus came out and it basically shut down at the Mountains of Madness because the
Yeah.
themes were so similar. This ancient alien race that created humans and then sort of let us go.
I think it's very telling that the main characters are sympathetic towards these elder ones, but not sympathetic towards the subjugated beings
Okay,
that
but the shoggoths do
the shoggoths are
smell really
terrible.
bad. They smell really bad.
Yeah,
So
but
what?
also
So
like
let's follow this trail though. So they're down in the thing. They're reading the hieroglyphs. Eventually, they smell gasoline,
they smell the elder ones and then they smell gasoline on top of that.
and they're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" So they go
What the
looking for the
hell?
gasoline.
And they find some bodies.
Yes, they find our boy. What's his face? Gedney.
Gedney,
Yep,
and the dog.
and the dog. And it's very vague what has happened to them.
I think my understanding is that they were killed like the others were, but their bodies were the least desecrated and like destroyed. And so, like they did with the original corpses of the elder ones, they were sort of patched up and brought along as specimens.
Yeah, it's yeah, they've been seemingly taken apart and put back together again. They the
Taxidermied.
the reasoning behind the old ones' actions is never clarified. Like they take all this equipment with them, they open up the canned goods, but it's never like explain because we don't get well, spoilers, we don't actually ever get to meet the old ones again because
No, and we don't have to worry about them
why not?
because they're dead.
So we meet some penguins. Tell us about these penguins.
You know what? I'm gonna be so for real with you. I don't think these penguins deserve to be described as grotesque.
Why?
Because all they say about them is that they're 6 feet tall, pure white, and blind.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. They're just blind white penguins.
Like, come on, guys. Those aren't grotesque penguins. Those are just underground penguins.
They're cave penguins. Like that.
Yeah.
It's a thing. They're
Penguins.
subterranean penguins who've lost their eyesight over the millions of years because they don't need their eyes anymore.
And they were
And
buddy with the old. Is it the elder ones or the old ones?
the old ones,
I keep saying
yeah.
the elder ones.
There's elder things, which is
Mhm.
another thing in Lovecraft. But I think
Yep.
they use a couple of different ways of referring to them in this. But yeah, like apparently, so it's confusing. So the old ones came to Earth. They built subaquatic, like sort of Little Mermaid kingdoms. And then,
Atlantis.
and what?
Atlantis.
Atlantis. And then they came to the surface and lived here for a while. Then the Cthulhu Spawn came and chased them back underwater. Then the Shoggoths rebelled and they eventually came back to the surface
So-
and built cities.
From what I understood of the timeline, they came to Earth, went underwater.
Uh-huh.
Some of them then went above the water. So there were sort of two different sects.
Yeah, they split off.
But the ones that were on land also were in the water some of the time. So they're unlike their other space features that did atrophy over time, their underwater features did not,
Right.
which allowed them to retreat underwater when necessary.
So I'm just gonna read this off real quick. So yeah, so the Cthulhu Spawn arrive from space. They have a truce.
Mhm.
The Cthulhu Spawn are like, woohoo, we're living on land. And then there's a cataclysm, and that's when Rillier, the Cthulhu's island, like sinks below the surface to be resurrected again in Call of Cthulhu. But so the old ones are like, oh, that's when the old ones over millions of years lose their spacefaring abilities.
Mhm.
And then the Shoggoths become resilient and intelligent. They start rebelling. There's a Shoggoth war. Then the Migo arrive. Then the old ones kind of retreat into a smaller civilization. And then during a geological upheaval, the Antarctic city gets destroyed. And then that's when this sort of area to the west becomes weird and taboo and like this sort of haunted land.
Mm-hmm.
Then another Antarctic city gets built. Everything's cool. Everything's warm. Well, actually, everything's warm. But then another cataclysm occurs, and Antarctica becomes the wasteland it is today.
Well, it's not really a cataclysm. It's
Right.
more
It's just life.
of like the Ice Age happens.
Right. The Ice Age
'Cause
happens.
the Ice Age is happening, yeah, around everywhere. But they start realizing it's happening and start moving slowly more and more back to the water
Yes. Or
until eventually they stop coming above the surface.
and there is like this thing of like they're like, well, wait, according to what we're seeing here, they moved out of this place before they needed to. So it wasn't just the encroaching ice that chased something else must have chased them out of here. There's also like a
yeah, they
warm
didn't want to live next to the Freak Mountains.
there's also like a warm underground ocean that they can access. And like there's a
Yeah.
lot. Can I say there's a lot going on in this story? Like Lovecraft built essentially
Yeah.
a playground for stories to happen with this. Like, and just like, we're not going to explain this. Do whatever you want with this. Do whatever you want with this.
Which was kind of his shtick, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He liked leaving things open ended.
We're
and
so delayed right now.
he liked letting people play in his playground.
We're very delayed.
Yeah, you started getting kind of choppy a little while back.
Oh, now I'm even lower to the ground.
You are lower to the ground.
It's that time of day where my internet freaks out for like 20 minutes, so.
Well, we'll just pretend that there's no delay, and then I'll edit out the awkward pauses.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. So they encounter the penguins. They start smelling a smell. What has happened?
And they're like, what has happened?
Yeah.
Well, they see some figures and they're like, we should definitely go look at those. And they find some horribly decapitated corpses, 4 of them to be exact, of some old ones. And it takes them a moment, too many moments, to figure out what happened. And know what happened because
at first they're like, this isn't all the old ones' corpses that they found. This is what they thought was dead old ones. They got up and they're not dead. This isn't all of them though. They must have been killed by the other old ones. Maybe there was a fight. Maybe they didn't like each other. Maybe they ripped each other's heads off. I mean, it's that makes sense because these are the only creatures they've known of to be around so far. Unfortunately, it's not other old ones because they find what?
Goo.
They find black goo.
They find goo.
They find black goo. They keep going down this tunnel and there's this mist. There is this mist that's been sort of rising up from somewhere and they're like, we don't know where this mist is coming from, but it begins obscuring the tunnel.
They've also at this point found some really bad, shoddy design work in some carvings and stuff that sort of replicates the old one's original artistry, but is a significant decline in skill. That's our next hint as to what our first hint as to what else is down here.
Yeah, and so
what's down here? Bad things.
We know that the old ones smell really bad, but something smells even worse. That's like there is a lot of this like, okay, so we can smell the gasoline, but we can smell the old ones. But then there's this third smell. And then these smells kind of compete with each other. And that's how you know something is or is not. There's a lot of descriptions of smell. Like Lovecraft is like fully engaging these characters' senses to get us through this, like to put us in very uncomfortable situations.
Danforth is the one who can smell the best, by the way. That's made very clear. I don't know why.
How would that show up in his character sheet? Like, how would that?
If he would have the scent ability, if it was Pathfinder, if it was Dungeons and Dragons, I don't know. I don't think there's
perception check.
It would be a perception check.
Yeah.
But he'd have like advantage on scent-based perception checks, which is like an ability that some creatures have.
So if you were Danforth, he'd be like, "Hold on, I'm gonna roll.
Let me sniff the air real quick."
And they're like, "You smell a smell that is pungent, but pungent in a way that the old ones are not pungent, and a much worse smell. You cannot see through the mist, though. But something, I'm going to roll a perception check for sound. Do I hear something coming? And if so, what does it sound like?
It sounds like, what is it, flutes in the wind or whatever?
Flutes in the wind that they've been hearing for a while, but it sounds like a certain words.
Certain words. I don't know how to pronounce. I mean, there's a very easy way to pronounce this. I don't know if I'm going to do it correctly. It's Tekalili?
So a lot of people say
Tekalili?
a lot of people say tekalili, tekalili, which has been pointed out many times in the last 100+ years that it is not a very threatening sound.
No.
But it's weird. I've also heard tekelili, tekelilai. It's just a weird nonsense phrase that gets repeated a lot. So yeah, they hear this sound, they hear the fluting, they hear the sound, and they assume it's one of the old ones coming for them.
To be
Because
fair, at this point, I think that they have, or maybe I just figured it out and I was projecting onto them. I think they have figured out that it was not an old one that killed them.
okay, but they haven't seen it yet.
They haven't seen it yet, but they did connect the site they came across to the sculptures they'd seen previously.
Oh yes.
Mm.
Who killed the original old ones? Yes, that was yeah, they figured they were like, wait a minute. Wait, and
And
Danforth is like, oh no.
and this is the next page is when they're like, anyways, that guy who wrote the Necronomicon super wrong. He said the mad author of the Necronomicon had nervously tried to swear that none had been bred on this planet. And I was like, well, he
Yes.
was either wrong or lying.
Well, that's what they said. They were like, Abdullah Hazred was so freaked out by the idea of shoggoths that he actually was like, they never brought any shoggoths to Earth. They were never here. Which they interpret, or at least Dyer interprets as like, these things must be pretty freaky. If the master of freaky things was like, we don't want to do, I don't want to even think about the fact that these things may be on Earth. So they start getting chased through
Infinitely plastic.
they're infinitely plastic, and they start getting chased by this thing yelling tekalili at them through the caves. There's a long chase scene through the caves, and at one point they're like, I gotta look back, I gotta look back, I gotta look back and see what this is. And they shine their flashlights at the mist just as the mist clears, and what is it?
Not an old one. I can't remember how to pronounce what is it called?
A shoggoth.
A shoggoth. Okay.
It's a shoggoth.
My brain doesn't want to hold on to that word, and I don't know why.
Good, because it's so scary.
It's like a gelatinous cube.
It's like, imagine a gelatinous cube, but that's very fast and that can take any shape at once.
Imagine a gelatinous cube, and then disregard that because you shouldn't be.
Right. Also, it's filled with eyeballs looking at you.
Imagine a gelatinous cube, but instead of a gelatinous cube, it was a cube made of flesh filled with eyeballs that was running at you at Mach speed.
At Mach speed. And the only reason they get away from it is they sort of like juke to the left when it goes to the right, and they like flatten themselves against a wall and like watch as it speeds past, and they're like, whew.
And the penguins get in the way.
The penguins take the blow for them, which is kind of sad.
It is sad. It is also sad. I did have a moment of like, no, before they realized what was actually coming after them, and they were like, it's kind of sad to leave a potentially crippled old one to die to a creature.
Yes.
And I
But
was
they
like, yeah,
do
that is
get
sad.
out.
They do get out, and it's not an old one. Those ones are probably all dead already.
Because the old ones that they found while mining in the cave were kind of just old ones that we don't know. They fell asleep, they went into hibernation, they went into stasis
But they were
long time ago.
Old ones.
Yeah, like millions of years ago, 50 million years ago.
Like
and Dyer is like, so these guys came to, one of their own was being dissected by a weird simian thing. There's these furry four-legged beasts screaming at them. Of course they freaked out. And they're scientists. So they're like, what the hell are these things? We've never seen them before. They dissect them.
And also, not only is it that, but also they fell asleep when the Antarctic was still green.
Right.
So they've woken up in this snowy wasteland with their city with a city visible in the distance. And they're like, what is going on? You've dug up our corpses, and now we have to rebury them. And also, what is this?
They head back to what they think is their home. They get there, and the place is just abandoned, and it's a ruin. And there's penguins and the things that they fought a war against twice. There's at least one big one down there wreaking havoc, but also cleaning the floor very well. They make a point that the floor where the shoggoth has been is you could eat off of it. It's so clean.
Which is, you know, interesting because it indicates that they are still following their old orders.
It's like a Roomba that's just like,
Yeah, it's like a Roomba that's gained sentience but still wants to clean the floors.
or
And
hasn't gained
also
sentience.
hates you.
Maybe it's just a Roomba. Maybe it's just cleaning up. Maybe that's what it's doing. It's like the best way to clean
I
up these
guess,
guys is just to suck their heads off. Like that's
well, I guess like in the grand scheme of things, would that creature still recognize the old ones that reappeared as its masters? I mean, if it was created by the newer ones, who knows how different they began to appear or look? Like it could very well have just been like, this is a threat, gotta kill it.
hmm We do know that in the shadow over Innsmouth, there is word in the town that there is a shoggoth somewhere in the town. I think it's the Church of Innsmouth might have one that they can use. We don't ever see it, but the old man, the old sailor that tells the story of what happened to Innsmouth is like, "You ever hear of a shoggoth?" And you're like, I don't know what that is." And this is the first time we're ever really clear on what a shoggoth is.
I
It's
feel
no
like
fun.
I feel like you can't just say that it's somewhere in the town. Like you have to know where that is. It's
It's somewhere.
somewhere. What do you mean it's somewhere? It's a giant cube made of eyeballs,
It's not a
flesh.
cube, it's a gelatinous mass.
Giant cube. I just picture it as a cube.
A fast cube.
A fast cube.
Well, they get in their airplane and they fly off. The airplane fortunately still works. But as they're flying away, Danforth hands over the controls to Dyer because his hands are shaking so bad. And while Dyer is flying over the mountains, remember there's another row of mountains, these even bigger purple mountains that the old ones were terrified of for reasons they would never say. While they're flying, Danforth glances over at these mountains, and what happened?
He sees a mirage of some kind. He sees a vision of something. We don't know. We'll never
Something.
know. We have an idea of what he saw because of his whisperings.
I hope no one ever has to piece together what I'm trying to say because of my whisperings.
I just don't I don't like it. I feel like he shouldn't have turned around.
Yeah,
The
he
proto
turns
shoggoths,
yeah,
bad.
the windowless solids with 5 dimensions,
That sounds like something out of the House of Leaves.
the nameless cylinder, the elder Pharos, Yog Sothoth, the primal white jelly. And then he just tosses out the color
color
out
out
of
of
space.
space.
He's like, the story I once read, the color out of space, the wings, the eyes in darkness, the moon ladder, the original, the eternal, the undying. With no context for any of this stuff, it all sounds awesome.
Yep. And that's when it's mentioned that Danforth is one of the few people who ever went completely through the copy of the Necronomicon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And
and
went insane.
went insane.
Yeah.
Although he didn't go as insane as some characters in these stories.
No,
Because he still has like moments of like
lucidity.
clarity
Yeah.
and is like a genuinely normal guy some of the time.
Yeah.
Well, who in these stories is truly a normal guy?
Right. I
He's
mean,
normal for himself.
even Dyer's like not doing great. Like he certainly doesn't want to go down in the subway anymore after all of this. But this is why he is writing this. He's like, there not only is this horrifically terrible and terrifying whatever, this shoggoth down in this abandoned city. There's something so terrifying beyond the mountains of madness, on these other mountains of madness, that it one billionth of a second glimpse of it made Danforth go absolutely insane. Like made him lose his mind. Like
And also here's its exact coordinates.
right. And he screams out Tekalili, Tekalili, Tekalili for a long time after that. But yeah, they get back to camp. Danforth's like, Tekalili, Tekalili, Tekalili.
Well, actually, no. He's not like that because they have conversations while on the plane. They
I
talk
guess that's
about
true. I guess that's true.
He screams that a couple of times and then he's freaking out, but they're still able to converse normally.
But they get back to camp and they're like, "So what'd you find there?" And they're like, "Nothing, nothing. Let's get back. Let's get back to the boats and let's just go home, okay?" Nothing happened, and
Nothing.
and it was fine. It was fine. It was good. Don't talk to Danforth for a while. He's a little tired. They get back to the ships. They sail back to America, and this is where. And I guess Dyer was like, well, good thing we didn't say anything. I guess no one's ever gonna take a boat back to Antarctica. And then he looks in the paper one day and he's like, oh,
Ah, shoot. Guess we gotta.
guess I gotta write at the Mountains of Madness.
Guess I've gotta. I should have just said something about some actual natural issue being over there that people couldn't survive.
Right. It's so boring there. I fell asleep and almost died so many times. It was so boring.
I feel like I retract my original statement. I think saying they were boring would just open them up to being willing to like explode them as part of or like
Right.
drill into them. I feel like you have to say if you drill into this, what actually happened at the camp they drilled and sulfurous gas exploded and killed everyone, you can't go over there.
I would be like, it's fine to go over there, but before you do it, wait until we've developed some sort of atomic type weapon. Blow the hell out of the place first, and then go and visit and see what's left. Just in case. Like
I did early on when they were looking at all this stuff, I was like, I wonder what else modern technology would have uncovered when they were down there. Like, first of all, they wouldn't have run out of film.
right, right. Everyone would have had their phones out and been sending Instagram messages to
You
each
know what I
other.
mean.
They'd have
Like
been buried in their social media.
like we so much like exploration technology has been crafted since this story was
Oh
written. I have
yeah.
to wonder like what else could have been discovered when they were down there if they'd had these modern tools.
Well, Willow,
Yeah.
if you're ever curious as to what else might have been discovered, may I recommend Robert M. Price's Beyond the Mountains of Madness, which contains many short stories about what happens beyond the Mountains of Madness. It's literally about what happens if people go now. What happens if people there are so many stories. Uh we have well, let's see. In addition to that, we have where is it? The Adventures of Andrew Doran by Matthew Davenport, which involved a story called Andrew Doran at the Mountains of Madness. We have the, as you brought up, the Chaosium game that is set
Mhm.
at the Mountains of Madness that uses this as a jumping off point so people can build campaigns around this world. But very importantly, uh we have the short story Who Goes There, which is essentially a pulp fiction rewrite of At the Mountains of Madness in a lot of ways, where an Antarctic expedition encounters an unknown ancient frozen alien that wreaks havoc all over there. Like that that isn't the same story, but as has been acknowledged many times, was definitely influenced by At the Mountains of Madness. And but we also have, I did not even know this until I was researching it this time. Also, this isn't the first time I've discussed At the Mountains of Madness on a podcast. I actually discussed this story a year or so ago on John McCoy's podcast Sophomore Lit, or maybe it was 2 years
Mhm.
ago or 3 years ago at this point. I can't remember. But I did not know this. There was a short story, 1928, in Weird Tales by
Mhm.
John Martin Leahy called In Admondson's Tent
Mhm.
that used the real Admonson Scott Race to the South Pole as the basis.
Mhm.
And it's presented as this is an expedition record that was suppressed because people can't know about it,
Mhm.
about how there was an earlier expedition by Sutherland that tried to reach the South Pole. As they were heading to the South Pole, the dogs became terrified of something around them. They didn't know what. They discover Roald Adamson's tent standing where they had left it in 1911. Uh,
Mhm.
but there's something wrong with the tent. There's something inside it, and the tent is sealed from outside. So they cut it open, and it's this abnormal alien life that's like the sort of swollen, throbbing thing that sends them into a panic and they flee. And the only thing that's left is they find a human head, like that's been
Mhm.
like decapitated outside of it. and they're trying to escape. They begin losing their sanity. They see something moving in the gloom that's following them. They're running from this thing they can't see that's following them. And they decide that whatever is there is a danger to the entire human race, and no one can ever know about it. That there's
Mm-hmm.
unknown beings and phenomena that exist at the South Pole that it's too dangerous for people to know about. We know for a fact that Lovecraft read this story, and in fact, this story can very, very easily slot in as a
Mm-hmm.
follow-up to In Adamson's Tent, which is
Mm-hmm.
completely available online at famousandforgottenfiction.com. You can read Leahy's In Adamson's Tent. So it's fascinating. We have Arthur Gordon Pym in Adamson's Tent. We have At the Mountains of Madness, and then we have Who Goes There, beginning this like cycle of Antarctic horror fiction that like kind of continues to this day.
You know what else this story is a precursor to? So we kind of glossed over this. They do talk about how the creatures like reproduce and how they created life and everything, animals, vegetation. They are sort of mixes of animal and vegetables, which means, as these things are seemingly the creator gods, that Veggie Tales is completely lore accurate.
VeggieTales is set in this world, or at least
Yep.
a version of this world.
Mm-hmm.
If the old ones hadn't been forced back into their aquatic cities by the Migo,
Mm-hmm.
have you ever seen the Migo, by the way? Like a
No.
picture of the Migo? So the Migo show up in a couple of his stories. Uh, so the Migo are what we think of as the abominable snowmen. He brings that up several times. He's like, we call them.
And they're made of matter that doesn't exist in our world?
Well, wait. So the Migo, I'm going to show you. This is the abominable snowmen. Uh,
Okay, I was waiting for it. Okay. Oh, I don't think so.
So that's one version of the Migo are horrific beings. They are nightmarish monsters, and Lovecraft's always like, or as we call them, the abominable
Has
snowmen.
he ever seen or read about the abominable snowmen
Which are
before?
like
Like what
they're
what
just
is
like
he
furry guys, right? Like
what is
that's the
he
abominable
talking
snowman.
about?
It's like the so we call these, but yes, the Migo are supposed. So what happens is the Migo take over for a while, but then there's a truce, and the Migo take over the northern lands,
Mm-hmm.
and the old ones take over the southern lands. But then during the Ice Age, the Migo are pretty much confined to the Himalayas. So the Migo are kind of the old ones of the Himalayas. So whenever there's monster attacks there, it's pretty much the Migo who can't survive
Are
outside of
they
the
are
Himalayas.
they carbon-based life forms?
No, they are not. They are
So then
otherworldly.
we know for a fact that Project Hail Mary doesn't take place in the Lovecraftian universe.
It does not. You can let that go. Finally, you
Yep.
let that go. But it
Finally.
is worth noting that many Bigfoot and abominable snowmen theories involve them being non-corporeal beings from other dimensions. So that you can't actually touch because they are made of matter that does
Okay,
not exist on this earth. So Bigfoot is a spiritual entity. It is not.
if Bigfoot ends up being a non-carbon based life form, I'd be impressed.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think it he would be, just given the fact that he looks so closely related to a bunch of other animals that
That is just
exist.
what he wants us to see. That is just what Bigfoot wants us to see. That is all our minds can do to make it make sense. It is not of this earth. It is not of our matter, and it is down for lovin'. It's down for so much lovin'.
Maybe that's why H.P. Lovecraft calls them the abominable snowmen, because that's all he
Oh,
could picture.
that's all I can
I don't
picture.
I don't agree. I think that if Bigfoot is real, he's just a guy.
Now, I want to get to this before we run out of time because, as you know, and I know, this used to be a Guillermo del Toro podcast. And Guillermo del Toro did work on, for many years, worked on an adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness.
This would be a
Uh,
hard thing to adapt.
it's incredibly hard. I think it can be done. I think it just has to be a
You
patient
just
story.
and you can't get caught up on Frankenstein.
Unfortunately, Guillermo del Toro. So I would say a screenplay that Guillermo del Toro worked on, and Matthew Robbins, it was Guillermo del Toro, Matthew Robbins, got released to the internet once it was like, well, there's no way this is ever going to get made.
Mhm.
he basically took At the Mountains of Madness and The Call of Cthulhu
Mhm.
and mashed them together almost 50-50. Now, we
Huh.
covered Call of Cthulhu a couple of years ago on this show.
Mhm.
The chronology, the story is basically like Dyer, the boats, the Arkham shows back up years after this story takes at the Mountains of Madness. It's been lost, it's considered lost.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, one day it drifts into port as a wreck. Dyer is on board with Danforth, but Danforth is dead and adhered to the wall. Dyer had to kill him. Dyer gets dragged to an insane asylum where he's like crazy and he's like screaming nonsense. So years later, then the Miskatonic's next expedition is going, but the Starkweather himself is like, I want to talk to this Dyer guy. So he goes talk to Dyer, who, by the way, is maybe or maybe not exploding with tentacles at random. And he's like, you can't go back there. Let me tell you the story of what actually happened. And so that's where you get the story. Dyer's got a pregnant wife, but what happens is there's a lot of like the characters are kind of reorganized. Like Lake is kind of this like sort of like father figure to Dyer. Um, they already know about the Elder Thing fossils before they go. It kind of speeds that up.
Pause.
What?
This is just Frankenstein.
But wait. So there's more characters. There's also a cameraman who's a 13-year-old boy named Pip, who is Gedney's brother. There's a lot of like religious subtext a la Guillermo del Toro. There's a lot of dream sequences for Dyer about a mysterious dark man who might be Nyarlathotep. We don't really know. There's a lot. There's a time travel. Like we're in this area, so like time doesn't quite work the same way, which is fine. Like
Which is
that.
fine. That kind of is the vibe that I was getting from some parts of this story with the Mirage thing where they saw the city of the past. I can understand that.
The elder things are discovered inside stone monoliths, as
Okay.
opposed to just underground. The penguins are more violent and they're more monstrous and
They kind of look
like
like zombie penguins.
yes. Now what happens though is that in Guillermo del Toro's adaptation, the shoggoths are actually beings who worship Cthulhu. And so the shoggoths are trying to bring Cthulhu back. And spoilers, Cthulhu's Rillier is what lies beyond the other mountains of madness.
Hmm.
And essentially what happens is what happens in Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
They accidentally call Cthulhu back. He rises up beyond the mountains. They
Hmm.
book it back to the ships. Everyone gets killed. They book it back to the
They
ships.
they 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 do their cross fingers at
They
him.
do their crossfingers at him. He chases him to the water. There is essentially, like in Call of Cthulhu, the battle between the ship and Cthulhu. They barely
Hmm.
escape, but because of the time dilation, Dyer like ages completely, and he's like now. Oh, and also the Shoggoths are basically the thinging everyone.
Hmm.
They have taken over people's like identities. Uh, but also people get infected by Shoggoths, so that's why Dyer's like, "You have to kill me. You have to kill me. I'm infected by the Shoggoths."
That
Um,
was that you mentioned something about a race of creatures that did that to like the Pluto people at some point.
Right. There is maybe it's the Watchers Out of Time. Maybe it's the Watchers Out of Time. Wilmarth, who gets mentioned in the story a couple of
Hmm.
times, who works at Miskatonic, his body was taken over by one of those beings in his
So
story.
it seems like it's a lot of stuff that's not necessarily unfounded in the Lovecraft universe. It's all just sort of
It's
combined.
mashed together a lot,
Hmm.
and a lot more people go into the city.
Hmm.
There is a lot more action with dynamite. They blow up the city. Danforth gets infected. They have the Necronomicon with them the whole time as like a guidebook. And
That's
then
stupid.
there's
Don't do that.
and then Dyer ends up hanging himself in the hospital. Uh
A much more depressing ending.
it's a much more depressing ending. It's much more action packed, and some of it reminds me a lot of what he ended up doing for Frankenstein
That's what I was just
with the
thinking.
stuff in the Arctic, with like
Hmm.
the monster on the ship, and a lot of like violence and people getting killed on the
No,
ice.
yeah, because the Frankenstein story was two ships stuck in the ice. They were trying to I mean, that's just traditional Frankenstein story. That's like just from the Frankenstein book. It's this era of writing was really focused on the Arctic and Antarctic because of how little we knew about them and how much we wanted to learn.
Yeah. Oh, and then Relier sinks again at the end. And also the elder thing, the old ones are far more monstrous in Guillermo del Toro's screenplay. They're more creepy crawlies than these
Well, yes,
sort of like scientists who are out of their own time.
as one can expect.
Now again, this is an old screenplay that
Mhm.
would have been reworked and reworked and reworked. So who
Yes.
knows?
I have faith in Guillermo del Toro. He's made some banger movies.
He's made some banger movies. He's made some choices I don't necessarily agree with. I would be interested in seeing someone else adapt this. Just in
I
I
want to see his adaptation, but I also want to see someone else's adaptation.
You just want to see his penguins.
I like his penguins,
You
but
like
also
his
I like his penguins, but also I am genuinely he's grown a lot as a filmmaker.
True. True.
I think
True.
I would love to see his adaptation in the same style as the Pinocchio movie
Oh, well, that may be what we're getting.
because that would be sick as hell.
If you're looking for a fantastic adaptation, though, of At the Mountains of Madness, first, the comic artist and writer Ian J. Culbard did a 1-volume adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness that used to be my favorite adaptation. It's very quick, but it does a pretty good job of like sort of translating a lot of Lovecraft's more
Nonsense.
esoteric nonsense into sort of physical form. But there is a 2-volume published by Dark Horse Comics by hold on, I'm gonna get his name wrong if I don't look it up. By my God, what's his name? By
Bye bye bye.
bye. Oh, Gou. I don't know how you pronounce it. Gao Tanabe. He's a Japanese manga artist. He did a 2-volume in Japanese, but has been translated and published by Dark Horse in America of At the Mountains of Madness that is very faithful to the degree that it covers all of Dyer and Danforth's treks through the underworld. It covers all the different kinds of buildings and architecture. Looking at it helped me make a lot more sense of the geography of what was going on. And it does play up. It makes a bunch of adaptations do this. It makes there's another one that I read that was like kind of weird. It was a lot of adaptations make Lake a bit more like the wild-eyed crazy scientist. Like, I've got to go explore. And like he and Dyer get into it a lot more. Like, this expedition's not about your biological expedition. It's about
Honestly, I think that's probably actually what
It's fair.
happened.
It's fair. Yep.
Because this guy's obviously that's not the main goal of this guy's retelling of the story, but the way that even he talked about it, I'm like, yeah, this is his perspective or his like retelling of the argument that they got into. I'm gonna guess it was worse.
But yeah, I have to give props to Gao Tanabe's At the Mountains of Madness. He's done a lot of Lovecraft adaptations, but this is a tour de force. Like, just look at the illustrations if you want to just sort of be like, oh, that's what he was talking about. That's what he meant by the architecture doing this. That's what that meant by the weird ramps doing this and like not making a whole lot of like there's a lot in there, but he does leave out. Here's the wild thing. The one thing that Tanabe leaves out of his adaptation is the second range of mountains and Danforth going crazy at the end. He just leaves that out. Like seeing something beyond the Mountains of Madness, it's not a thing in his adaptation. It's just the Tekalili and Dyer just being like, nobody needs to go back to this place.
Because that's the smart way to tell the story.
Look, there's a lot of ways to tell this story.
Because telling a group of scientists not to go somewhere and that it's bad and evil and giving them the exact coordinates of where that place is dumb and stupid, and I don't understand why he did it.
But one thing that these adaptations all do really well that I really like about them is they make it make sense why Dyer wants to go searching in these terrible places. Like it makes it make sense from a science standpoint and from a guy who wants to find the one last surviving member of the destroyed expedition. He's just like, we've got to find it. If he's in here, it's our duty to find him. We cannot leave a man behind.
Yeah, no, as I was reading it, I was like, I understand why they keep going forward. Do I think it's dumb? Yes.
Yes.
Do I think that after they found the guy's corpse, they should have been like, guess we better head back 100%. But I do understand the need for answers, even if I personally would be like, fuck this.
Well, on that note, Willow,
Yes.
what is the next story in Foundations of Fear?
I can tell you one thing about it. It's way shorter.
It's way shorter. What is it?
It is The Little Room by Madeline Yale Wynn.
I am so excited. I have never read this story. I don't know anything about Madeline Yale Wynn. I am going into this completely blind.
I can tell you that she's remembered for her early contributions to the arts and crafts movement.
We'll talk about the arts and crafts movement. Trust me. Yeah, whenever anybody says arts and crafts, I'm always like, you think that's just a saying, but that's an actual artistic movement. So yeah.
The Little Room is a minor masterpiece on par with Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper.
So I've heard. I've never read it.
It is it is 8 pages long.
Hallelujah. Because at the Mountains of Madness,
It
quite
was 60 pages long.
novella, novelette.
Fun time.
Fun time. You know what, though? I still like this story.
I love this story. I feel the need to reiterate, though, that H.P. Lovecraft is a terrible, terrible man, and we do not endorse his beliefs or anything that has come out of his mouth.
He was a piece of crap, but I will say, according to his ex-wife, he was okay in bed. He was okay in bed. He got the job done. He got the job done.
He got the job done.
He got
What
the
does that
job
mean?
done.
I don't know. And
I don't know
care
what
to
that
know.
means, but he did get the job done.
I guess. And you know what? No, there's nothing really else
There's
to say.
nothing else to say. There's nothing you should say because it would be terrible.
There's a little bug on my book. Sorry.
Good, good. There should be because it's a scary book. Well, until next time we get to the little room. What was it called again? The tiny room, tiny toys.
Little room.
The little room.
It's called the little room.
I'm Phil,
And I'm Willow.
and we'll see you when we're back down in the
We dig even
dark
further into the
into-
foundations of fear.
of the dark descent. Bye.
One day we'll have an outro that makes sense.
Never.